All right, we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Neiburger. I'm director of the Ann Arbor District Library. I've worked here for 27 years. I've been director since 2022, and we're very excited by the possibility of bringing a wonderful new facility to the community of Ann Arbor. So we do not have a specific project in mind. This is not something that we are bringing to Planning Commission, a site plan or an area plan or anything like that. We have requested a waiver of the area plan requirement because we would like to have the property rezoned in advance of having a project, so that we can know going into the design phase and the partnership development phase of the project that the city has agreed that the use that we have in mind is appropriate. So I'm going to go through a couple slides here. We'll have plenty of time for questions and comments at the end. And just to remind everyone what we're here for, this is a map of downtown Ann Arbor. The blue site is what we're talking about. The downtown library currently sits on 3 parcels. The original Beale property of the, which is the biggest piece, and then 2 smaller pieces that were acquired a little bit later that currently make up most of the parking lot out back. So you're not going to get to an event at the library without some history. So this is the Beale House, which was standing on this site in 1910. It was built before that as well. This is a photo, as near as we can tell, taken around 1910. By the time they were making the decision about what to do with this site, this is a photo of the Beale House from February 1956, just after they had decided to build the library on that site and raise the Beale House. It was torn down in February of 1956, but there's one piece that is still existent in our community. Does anybody know what it is? None of you historians know? Steve knows.
It's the books in front of the Clements?
That's right. The books in front of the Clements Library are the carriage steps from the Beale House.
Oh, wow.
And you can see them actually in this image. There they are right down there. And they still stand right outside the Clements Library. So living history. So this is what it looked like in 1956 when they were deciding where to put the library. They needed to decide where to put the library because the university had purchased the site where the Carnegie Library stood. And that was known to some of us as the Freeze Building, part of the old Ann Arbor High School, right? And the university was moving forward with developing that as university space, and the library needed to be relocated. So I was wondering, how much controversy was there at the time of the Beale House? And this is actually audience hostile to board. The Beale site was actually favored. They had an audience of 350 people turn up to demand that the school board, who was in control at that time, build the new library on the site of the Beale House, and not on some properties on Miller Street, which are kind of in the middle of West Park. You know, there's a little weird entrance on West Park to Miller Street, right? That was originally acquired with possibly being the site of the downtown library because there was worries there wasn't enough parking downtown. Sound familiar? Yep. So they had some 350 persons show up to make sure that the school board knew that they wanted the downtown library on this site, downtown, on the site of the former Beale House. I also found this article, which one of the members of the school board at the time, Mr. Marquardt, said, "We do have assurance from the public that they will not object to paying for parking while using the library." And that's February 9th of 1956. So this was all because there was a lot of concern about where the library would go and a strong commitment, a strong demand from the community for the library to be located in the heart of downtown. And we build on that today. The other thing that I discovered was, it was interesting that this library opened in 1956 and the undergraduate library on campus opened in 1957, which maybe some of you know what it used to be called. That name somewhat survives. The Ugly, that's right. And that building was renovated multiple times and has since been completely redone into what it looks like now. But those were both new libraries, and those two, what I saw in this article was just a delight, was that the undergraduate library opened with a collection of 50,000 volumes, which is about what we have in the kids' room at the downtown library right now. Now, of course, there are a lot skinnier books, as you can imagine. So here's a photo of this room from 1962, immediately recognizable. This is for the Mock UN. The door in the same place. There was a projectionist booth that's no longer there. We've replaced the linoleum with carpet, done some new lighting. But for the most part, this room is unchanged, and this is still one of our main program rooms in the space, as designed in 1962. It did have to be modified to make wheelchair access to the main room. However, there's still no wheelchair access to the stage. We have a long ramp that we can roll out when needed, but this is not designed around those sorts of needs. So then, in 1973, they acquired the lots behind the library and began an expansion onto the back of the original building. So this is the construction of that in 1973. Here's a photo of the library as of 1980. This photo is taken from the roof of the YMCA, and you can see there the original 1957 building and the 1980 addition behind it. And then in 1990, this is the construction of what is now the current shape of the library, where they added on more to the first and second floor in the back. They added on the third and the fourth floor, and this is the steel that you can see here. Now, where we're at right now is that we're in a situation where we've basically determined that this library building is no longer suitable to the library's needs. We're continually capacity constrained almost every day. We're running out of space, things are in the wrong place. There's a lot, because this building was put together in 3 different phases. The places where those buildings come together cause a lot of problems. There's a lot of ceiling tiles missing, where there's constant leaks. As well as lots of ventilation challenges, all kinds of things like that. But the main issue is that the configuration of this space is poorly suited to the library service that operates within it. So we are investigating what our options are to develop a new facility on this spot. So that brings us to our zoning request. So what is zoning? This is a quote from the city's page about codes and guidelines in reference to the Unified Development Code, which divides the city into zoning districts and contains the development standards for construction in the city, such as permitted uses, setback and height regulations, parking, landscaping and buffering, signs and fences, and the approval procedures for new construction and redevelopment. So this is a map of downtown showing the current zoning. The dark red area is all zoned D1, which is the core downtown densest area. The green spots are PL, meaning zoning of public land. Now you can see not all of these are actually public land, and we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Also, the yellow ones are PUDs, planned unit developments. So what you can see here is that here's the current site of the downtown library. It's currently zoned public land. Here's the federal building. That's also zoned public land. Here's Liberty Plaza and the Kemp House. That's zoned public land. And then we've got a bunch of PUDs around.
Excuse me, what about the
I'm sorry, we'll take
parking structure?
the library parking structure is zoned D1.
D1?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We'll take more questions at the end, Kathy.
Thanks.
So now we have, here's an important distinction I want to make, that zoning is not ownership. Even though the library is seeking a rezoning of the site from public land to D1, that does not affect the ownership of the site. The library intends to own the site in the public trust in perpetuity, as we have. And that the current AADL property zoning, all of our other facilities, this is the only one that stands on property zoned to public land. The downtown library stands on public land. Mounds Creek branch is actually standing on property zoned R4A, which is multiple family dwelling. Pittsfield branch is in the Pittsfield Township. That's a PUD. It wasn't the library's PUD, but that whole area with the ice cube and the offices, that was one PUD. Planned unit development. Traverwood branch is in the city of Ann Arbor. It's zoned O for office. Westgate branch is actually in rented space at Westgate Mall, and that's zoned TC1 for the transit corridor. And our archive space out in Scioto Township is zoned I1 for limited industrial. So the library occupies spaces that are all held by the public in a wide range of zoning conditions. I don't want there to be any confusion about the line between those two. So I'm just gonna say this twice. Rezoning the current downtown library to D1 opens up new possibilities for the site, meeting community needs and library needs, delivering a new downtown library, new housing, and new opportunities without new tax revenue. That's the goal of this project. I don't think I need to say it again, you all got it. All right, so how would we go about doing that? How do we do this without new tax revenue? Well, there's a new trend in the US that's happening in lots of cities of various sizes to develop libraries with housing above, okay? And we've seen this in many different locations. This is an article from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy by Kathleen McCormick. This was published in 2019, and this is about housing above the library in the Portland area. There's also a couple other projects. This is the Independence Library and Apartments from Irving Park, Chicago, that was opened in 2019. The city of Chicago did a number of redevelopments, and they actually built 3 different branches that had housing above. Most of them are solely city projects where the city is developed because it's a city library. Unlike us, we're an independent district library. It's a city library, and then they partnered with a developer to develop affordable housing on top of the library. Here's a new project that just opened in New York City. This is called the Eliza. It's a New York Public Library branch and affordable housing complex. It's in Inwood, Manhattan, and that just opened a couple months ago. You can see some photos of it on the interior on the right. That's 10 stories of housing above the new library. And here's another project in Brooklyn. This is the Brooklyn Public Library, Sunset Park branch. They demolished a branch that opened in 1905 that had a lot of infrastructural and challenging issues. There's some photos of the exact same model of portable air conditioner that we have in our sorting room for our book pros who sort all the books to not be so hot all the time. So we've been able to look immediately familiar to people who work in this library. So that's the Brooklyn Public Library Sunset Park branch. Then there also in Chicago is the Taylor Suite Apartments and Little Italy Branch Library that opened in 2019. So that's another project with affordable housing above. And then there's another unique aspect of the site which I want to mention. This is a chart of every metro area in the United States where more than 5% of the population takes transit to work. This is it. Little tiny Washtenaw County punching above its weight right there. Because of the ride and the university bus system, we are one of the only places in the Midwest. You can see the Chicago area, of course, and then Champaign-Urbana, another metro area with a university effect there. So we are a community that actually has unusually high transit ridership for this part of the U.S. And there's some really interesting projects happening with transit-oriented development at libraries. Now these are much bigger cities and much bigger libraries than what we've been talking about. This is Dock 1 in Aarhus in Denmark. Aarhus is a community about the size of Washtenaw County. And of course they have light rail, we don't have light rail, but they have a light rail station right underneath the library. The other thing that's very cool about this is that these are co-located city offices. Like the kind of equivalent of the DMV for applying for things are also inside the library. And when I visited this library some years ago, and one of the things that was most Denmarkian to me is there's a chime that sounds at 5 o'clock and they say, "It's 5 o'clock, the library staff is going home, have a nice evening." And I don't think we can quite pull that off here, but boy, it's a lovely idea. We do open the Westgate branch before library service begins, and that works pretty well, but it's after we already have staff in the building. Here's another great transit-oriented development. This is the Calgary Library, just a gorgeous building. And then they also have a tram line that goes right underneath it. Again, this is a much bigger city, 1.4 million people. But it's just a beautiful example of libraries embracing transit. And here in this site, we have the best access to transit in the state of Michigan, right? You not only have the Blake Transit Center, the hub of their hub and spoke system, you also have the D2A2 bus and the Michigan Flyer right outside of the library. And we have people in the library waiting to board those buses all the time. So it's very much an aspect of this site that we have a lot of transit, and it's great to see that. It's a way that it's an attribute for the library going forward. Okay, so in 2019, the library commissioned a mixed-use library feasibility study, and that's on our website. It's at aadl.org/about-us/reports. Those of you who received the postcard, there's a same link that's on the postcard. This is a document produced to explore the financial feasibility of a mixed-use library to see if enough revenue could come in through the library leasing space above a library to be able to fund the construction of a new library without a bond election. And the answer was, yeah, it's possible. And the possibilities are vast depending on who your partners are and what your mix of housing is that comes out of that. So I wanted to show one cross-section from this. And this is just an example. This is not a design. This is just an example of something that complies with the D1 zoning, but shows what type of layout you might have on a building. So this shows 2 floors of underground parking. Not sure we would still do that, but it's something that is definitely possible. The parking garage has numerous places where parking can be added next door buildings. Then 4 stories of library, a 5th floor of office space to be leased out to other tenants. With what's happening in commercial real estate, that might not make as much sense as it used to, but the idea was, at that time in 2019, that then provides a library with expansion room to grow up, is that we could stop leasing that 30 years down the line and expand to have more library space out of there. And then 10 stories of residential housing above that of various types. So again, this is not a plan, this is not a rendering, this is just something that complies with the zoning that we're seeking to give you an idea of the types of possibilities that exist on the site. So here's a rendering that was put together by Smith Group of the project on the Y lot, the YMCA lot. So this is basically floating above, just above Muligs. You can see Muligs down there on the bottom, looking east along William. And what you see here is this is the rendering, and they're currently in process of finalizing a developer for that project. You can also see a dotted line there for the project that's happening going up right behind the library right now. It's 16 stories of student housing. And then you can also see down the block Tower Plaza, which was built in 1969, which is the tallest building for 35 miles in any direction. So this is very much a corridor that is shaping up, and you can see where the library's spot in that. It's why it makes a lot of sense to seek D1 with all the zoning that's happening around, and for a similarly sized building to the surrounding parcels. So what are some of the possibilities? Who might the library work with? We're not going to start any of these conversations until after we're through this process. But all this would be done in public with a public RFP seeking partners to join us on this project. Some of the possibilities include senior housing or independent living, affordable housing with affordable housing partners, whether that's the city, whether that's Avalon, whether that's other partners, supportive housing partners, such as Avalon does a lot of that as well, workforce housing with a private developer, market rate housing with a private developer, visual arts partner would be a great thing. You know, there's art spaces looking for places to do combined live work spaces for artists in the area. That'd be a cool thing to see in the downtown library. A performing arts partner, you know, the library could really benefit from having a large auditorium, and we turn away people from our shows all the time, and when we set up the lobby with folding chairs, it's just not a very comfortable environment. Plus we have to turn people away, plus it disturbs the rest of the library. So it would be great for us to be able to have an auditorium, and that would be a great partnership with a performing arts partner, because we don't use it exactly every night, and they don't use it exactly every night. So it's a good way to make use of those spaces, and there aren't really a lot of options in that 400 to 500 seat area in Ann Arbor. It's a very unique spot, and it's hard to get spaces in that size. Another option is an educational or institutional partner. Years and years ago, WCC was asking us if they might want to have some space downtown. This is like 15 years ago, right? So there's possibility of other educational or institutional partners being part of this project. Nonprofit tenants, if we wind up with office space, it's a really good fit. And then also cafe or food tenants. You know, one of the things we get asked constantly is, can't we put a cafe in the library? Especially since the Friends have relocated to their wonderful new space out on Parkland Plaza and getting spaces. Can't you turn that into a cafe? Yes, it would cost $600,000 just for the plumbing. Just for the plumbing, before you even do anything else, because of the way that the building is configured. So it's something that's not really necessarily a realistic investment in the building at this point. However, there's a really interesting project that they have at the Toledo Library, which is a cafe that kind of has a pay-it-forward model, where when you go to the cafe and you buy some food, you can also buy some food to be used later for someone who needs a meal. And they can put up receipts on the wall, and someone can just take down a receipt and get that meal. So there's interesting models happening at urban libraries around the US, and there's some potential for those types of possibilities in a new library as well. So, all that said, that's roughly what we have in mind. We sent out 3,100 postcards to anybody who lives within 1,000 feet of the downtown library. Only about 400 of them have come back. So I reached everyone who was required, and we're taking names of everyone who's here as required by the city's participation ordinance. We'll be preparing a report. Everyone who signed in will receive the report from the meeting before it goes to the Planning Commission for our rezoning request. So that's the information we have for you tonight. Any questions or comments? All right, let me bring the microphone.
What are the data that show that you need actually a bigger footprint for this library? I mean, you've said subjectively we're crowded all the time, but whenever I come in, I'm not impressed that this place is overrun with patrons as opposed to the satellite libraries, which are very heavily subscribed. So I guess, is there a study that documents that, yeah, we need a bigger footprint or we need better throughput?
Sure. I mean, there were 984 bookings in this library so far this year. We are constantly having to turn partners away. A good example, I mean, these are all anecdotal stories. The one thing I would say is there was a space use study done many years ago about the amount of square footage required for the community of this size. And when this building was built, Ann Arbor had a population of 65,000 people. And now the library serves a population of 170,000 people. And one of the big things about that is that the library space that we have, when it's used at peak capacity, we are bursting at the seams. And many days, that's not peak capacity. But generally, even though this library can look fairly empty, there are more people through the door than there are on the Westgate branch many days. And just as a real specific anecdotal example, our Tiny Expo is one of our biggest shows that brings over 6,000 people to the downtown library over just a couple hours. And this year we are turning away 200 vendors. We are accepting about 80 vendors and turning away 200 who would like to be able to sell at that market, but we don't have space for them. We had a show just a couple weeks ago, Judge John Hodgman, which we had to turn away the tickets for that event. We had to limit it to 300 people. It sold out in 2 minutes. We were fending angry emails from nerds for months after that because they weren't able to get into the event. So we have lots of examples of it, but the main issue is that it's not a bigger footprint, it's not necessarily a bigger library. The amount of square footage is not really the problem. The issue is the configuration of the square footage, the maintainability of the square footage, the efficiency of where the square footage is. There's a lot of dead space in this library because how it was put together, and we spend a lot of time reconfiguring the space over and over and over again to make use of the spaces that we have. Does that answer your question?
Not entirely. Are there plans to obtain objective data to make a decision? I mean, anecdote is great, but I think you need, to move people, you need some data.
I mean, as we start talking about an actual project as opposed to a rezoning request, we'll have lots of data available about the utilization of the downtown library. And that's something that appears in our annual report every year as well. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I think she was there first.
Who's next?
Yeah, she been there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I basically agree with everything that you said.
It's on.
Is it? Okay. Except the location. Have you looked at building it on top of the parking structure next door? Because we could take advantage of the structure that's there, the underlying structure. We would get our housing above it, and based on my age bracket, senior housing would be really great. And one of the issues I had with the plan for the other library back in 2012, I think, was the number of years you'd have to move to a temporary location. And if you built next door, you could build it, close this one, and move next door over the weekend or whatever. You know, the downtime would be minimum, and the library owns enough property that they could do a land swap on about half of their property, and then you'd still have more property that you could sell if it's D1 and for some more revenue.
That's an interesting idea. The library doesn't typically make plans for other people's property. We're not in control of that, and the charter language doesn't seem to allow that sort of usage. So I think those are two significant issues. However, the other issue is that we did a study several years ago when we were first considering the downtown library. One of the challenges is that a library full of books is actually heavier than 10 or 15 stories of apartments, and that the structural system that's already in the ground there may not be able to hold the stacks. But that's engineering stuff. That was just something that we heard at that point. I don't have hard data on that. So it's an interesting idea. We're open to it. But at this point, we're focused on this property that we're in control of and seeking the rezoning of that site.
Oh, okay, thanks. And I just want to give credit to former Councilman Stephen Kunselman. He's the one that's mentioned this swap many times. So thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Frank? Here, Len will bring in the microphone.
What would happen during the period of time that where you get the zoning, you're into your project? What would happen to the downtown library in terms of its functionality? Is there a way to move some of that to other?
Yeah, we would absolutely be committed to a temporary downtown library somewhere in the downtown area. We can't guess as to where that might be because we'd be depending on what's available at the time. But there's, as you know, there's a fair amount of first floor retail that's available in the downtown area. There's other spaces. I've had my eye on that space across from Blank Slate next to Argus for a very long time if we can get the graduate architecture studios out of there. That would be a fabulous place for a temporary downtown library. So, you know, that we are committed to opening that before this would close, or, you know, within a week or something like that of when this would close. We know that a downtown library is an important place, and we would be committed to operating a downtown public library throughout the project. Thanks, Frank. Other questions? Over here. You got it.
Hello, Jeff Crockett.
Hi, Jeff.
Just to be clear, is the height limit 150 feet with a D1? Is that I see 15 stories, approximately 10 feet a story?
It depends on your premiums. There's, it's about the FAR, and then there's the height limit as well. And it depends on what premiums were in the project. Because if we were to, going D1 would be staying within the zoning. So there is a height limit. Is it 150 feet?
Yeah, I don't know. It's changed. The premiums changed and the height limits changed recently. And I don't remember the specific.
But it would be within the D1 zoning is what our intent would be.
So is it, someone else may know this, but is it possible if you have certain energy saving features in the building, you can actually go higher?
There are, it's possible in some cases, and it also depends on what happens with the zoning code between now and when the project begins.
Okay, and the last question I have, the current zoning allows for what height?
Unlimited height.
No, I mean what's on this site.
On this
right
site, public land does not require, there's no zoning limit. So we could build a 100-story building here if we wanted to. As far as the zoning goes. You know, it's preposterous, it's not something we would do. But the point being, there are no zoning restrictions on public land. We are seeking to bring this project into the city's zoning regime. So that the city's rules and what they want to see built apply to this building, as opposed to when it's public land, where it really doesn't. As the university is well aware. Thank you.
This doesn't seem to be working well.
I'll turn it up a little bit.
Are you aware of the status of the proposed housing across the street?
Just a moment. Our understanding is that it is in process. I don't know much more about it than that at this moment. But I had heard that they had an RFP window for developers and the window closed. So I don't know that there's an announcement yet of who the developer would be.
But there is a development pending, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. The city did the pre-entitlement process to determine what the zoning and the PUD would be for that site. And I believe they're in the process of negotiating with some developers.
And you still see the need for housing here if that development takes place?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There are 90,000 people that commute into Ann Arbor every day. Yeah, we have a housing crisis. We need buildings everywhere.
All very interesting. I'm interested in the, as you must know, the relation with how the library would develop and the development of the center of the city commons on the other side in Library Lane. Particularly the vision of a civic center building that's very aligned with functions the library might undertake and does undertake, a cafe, for instance. And how would there be coordination in this development with the development of the center of the city property?
I would be happy to have that conversation if anything happens on that site by the time we're starting this project.
Karen Hart, former planning director for the city.
Yes.
I have always wanted something to happen here. I find this very exciting, and I'm glad you guys are thinking about moving forward. And I don't have a question, but just a couple comments.
Please.
One is absolutely as much housing as you can make happen here, but not student housing.
Oh, yes.
I know you can't legally, but
My apologies.
regular people need housing in downtown, and especially the people, you know this stuff.
You'll notice something missing from this list.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
I mean, housing, even if it's not just affordable housing, if it's mixed market rate, but a real, you could create a neighborhood here with
Yes.
all the little pieces that are around it. It's just fabulous opportunity.
Yes, we would not be looking at partnering with a student housing developer. That's what has been mostly happening, and that's not really what's
Well,
interesting to
that's
us.
what gets financed, you know,
Yes.
but it's like you control the land, so you control a whole lot of what goes on
That's right.
in this project. So yeah, housing,
We also found, we did some polling on this in 2022, and we found very strong support for a project like this, so long as it doesn't have any student housing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's good. Also, I know the auditorium way back when was controversial. I think it's so needed. It's not going to take over the building, but you know, you need space. You know this, but I'm saying it as a regular consumer of all of the libraries, I just would love that tremendously. I'd like to live downtown, and I can't afford, you know, $1 million condo, and yet my meager pension and Social Security make it too much money to afford, you know, low-income housing.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
I'm stuck in the middle. That's what we need. Anyway, and also, you know, design can be expensive, but this, I hope whatever happens, that it's fabulous, that it is iconic, that it is not just a boring building. It can be so exciting. It will be the focal point of downtown.
Yes. Yeah, we would love to have a project that
Even if
people
you need a
bring
little
their out of
notice,
town
do it.
guests to see. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Heidi Schmitz. Even though I live over by the hospital, I do work here downtown, and my partner and I use the downtown branch often. I'm really loving what you have proposed here. Much like Karen said, that every one of these ideas is great. I'm loving the housing option, but I'm also interested in partnerships with artists as well. I'm also really, I'm curious about, I know you said that the services that's existing, but I'm wondering if there's any other services that you might want to offer as well. I know that as somebody that's a social worker, I know what's a new thing in a lot of different communities now is to have a social worker in the library system as well.
Yes.
The reason being is because there's a lot of services. You could get community resources, get help with any other, like especially health-related stuff. So I'm curious if that would be something that you would also be able to have within this project.
Yeah, there's one thing I'd say about that, which is that a lot of the places that are doing social workers placed in libraries is where the library is a part of the city or part of the county, and they employ those social workers at other departments of the same organization, whereas we as a district library are not a part of the city and not a part of the county, and don't have a mandate for health and human services out of our tax revenue. However, we are very wide open to social workers meeting with their clients in the library. It happens informally all the time. And we're also open if community mental health or other social workers would like to talk to us about office space in the library. So it's like absolutely something that we would be wide open having a conversation about. You know, with it being a small town and it's not very far to CMH's offices, it's not something that we're hearing about from them now. But it is something that we would be very interested in exploring at their question. Just a moment. And the other piece of that is that a lot of the things we really like to be able to do involve things that you can do with better sight lines through the library. The library is chopped up into a lot of little weird pieces. And for example, we'd like to be able to offer where you can book a machine for, like, you can get a 3D printer or a lead typesetting machine or a serger or a quilt machine or any one of a number of different machines. In order for that to be a reasonable service to deploy, we need to have a place where there's a service desk that can monitor all of them at the same time. And that's not really something that we have in the building currently. However, we do plan to experiment with artist incubator spaces. The former Friends Shop, we're going to be dividing that into 3 spaces, and those will be offered at very low rates to business incubator spaces focused around creative and retail space. So did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Thank
great.
you very much. All right. And sorry. Yeah. Yep.
My name is Brian Chambers. I guess my question goes back to a little more on understanding the charter for the library, for AEDL, and what can be accomplished. So you talked about machines and equipment can be checked out. The Carnegie Library was first financed by Dale Carnegie, and it was on...
Andrew Carnegie, but yes.
Thank you. And my Carnegie's mixed up. I appreciate it. We're here in Ann Arbor. Everybody's more intelligent than anyone else. The Carnegie Library was premised on economic development. He financed libraries across the country because he believed that literacy was critical to economic development, and we needed literate democracy and all the rest of that, so it's all tied up in that. Benjamin Franklin started libraries for getting books available to those who couldn't afford them, so it was also a literacy campaign. My first question would be, and then I have a follow-up if I may, what is the charter of AEDL from an economic development perspective that we can understand?
Well, the mission of library is to provide public access to and ownership of shared information resources for the education and recreation of the community. So we don't have a statutory economic development role. And for many years, the role of libraries in economic development has been informal, as places you could go to have a small business advice, get your business started, incubate your business. We have people in here who are starting their startups and just looking for fast Wi-Fi all the time, or a place to meet. So in many cases, that's informal because we are not an economic development agency as they are defined statutorily, right? The other thing I would just mention is another thing that Mr. Carnegie said, is that if he paid his workers more, they would just waste it on drink and finer cuts of meat. So there's a little bit of patriarchy in Mr. Carnegie's tax dodge there. But you know, it's certainly the lifting up of the community is a role that we know we play here every day.
So I'd like to build on the theme of creating more of a showcase for Ann Arbor and what the basis of that would be around the library. It's just a brief statement. I'm kind of curious how people here resonate with that. The University of Michigan is an international university, prominent and all the rest of that. And Ann Arbor, in some respects, kind of needs to catch up, and we're kind of the tail of the dog getting wagged all the time. I get that. But we're part of the knowledge economy. So I would encourage that a showcase be developed in the new building that emphasizes that. If it's going to be the downtown center, it ought to have placemaking, so the commons next door, maybe you don't develop it, but it could be co-developed in alignment with what's done at the library. We've got transit centers, 2 of them, the Amtrak and so on. It can become an economic development center by default if it's designed and configured on that basis, maybe a next door conference center and things of that nature. I'm hoping that those on the library, yourself and others involved in this, can be thinking expansively like that, to really develop a showcase and a magnet of the downtown area. And Ann Arbor is in its role of the knowledge economy, because Google started here. People don't understand that. Page started here as part of the U of M database search system, doing searches of library systems all across the world. So I'm hoping that those types of themes can be built culturally into your new library design in the building and make it a showcase so that Ann Arbor resonates as part of the knowledge economy the way the U of M does. And we don't need to be the tail of the dog all the time, because we've got a major library now in ways that has been kind of hidden before. That's my statement. I'm very
appreciate that
of all of this, and I think we need a vision going forward that's compelling. The campaign you did the last time you went for a bond issue, it didn't provide a vision. The library needs to be rewired. You need multimedia, you need modern media, you need interconnectivity. It doesn't have it down here. So you've got to rebuild just on that. If you're looking for a justification for the build, it's the limitations of the technology here. That should do it in and of itself. Let's not quibble. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Danielle. I'm a new resident. I'm your neighbor over here at 322 East Liberty. I wasn't here when the bond went up. Can you tell us a little bit about what the bond proposed and why it failed? And because it's my understanding that the bond was kind of seeking to do what you're trying to do here now, through a kind of capitalistic maneuver.
No, the bond was very direct to issue bonds to redevelop a 4-story library on this site. And it was not in partnership with anyone else. It was just a very straightforward library development.
And so why wasn't that passed by taxpayers? Why was that not in the interest of people that pay property taxes in the county?
You know, it's a good question. We don't really look backward that much. But I mean, just a few tidbits that we knew at the time is that, there was organized opposition to the campaign. There was also, it was the day that Matty Maroon put 6 nightmares on the ballot. They were all above this, and they all went down. So people said, no, 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 and then they turned over the ballot, and here's a library question. So more people did not vote yes or no on that question than the gap between the yeses and the nos. And so it was just a bad day at the polls.
A bad day at the polls can be overwrought by a good day at the polls, right? So is there a reason we're not asking our community to come forth and support this as a community with our taxes and not kind of partner in a way where we may lose control of what is a public facility?
Sure. Well, partially We've done polling to examine how people feel about taxes for a new library, and it's still not super great. You know, there's a lot of millage fatigue in the community, and this is a award-winning, wonderful facility, and people look at the library and they say, well, what's wrong with it, as we've heard today? So I think that there's an element of still not a real strong support for a new tax to redevelop the library, and our board has determined that if there's a mechanism by which a facility can be redeveloped at no cost to the community, that they should run out that opportunity first before going to the taxpayers for more money. And we found very strong support for that. Scott, would you listen? Sorry.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up
Sure.
on that. Are any of your board members financially interested in this development?
No, it's
None of them are involved in real estate or real estate renting?
we have a conflict of interest policy to prevent that.
Perfect.
So and just to follow up on Eli's point, I'm a trustee on the board. My name's Scott Trudeau, and the board has no interest in selling the land that the property sits on. We're fully committed to maintaining public ownership of the land and of the building that the library is in. So while we might partner with a developer who will develop and co-own the space above the library, there's no intention of actually selling the space or the land, and we intend to maintain full control. So there's no public-private partnership where we're going to like sell the land and lease it back or anything like that. That's not on the table.
If you co-own, aren't they partial owners?
Well, depends on what
That's the
percentage.
definition of co-own. I mean, maybe
Depends on what percentage of the project.
So
they
what
are.
is the percentage of the project?
We don't know. That would be something that we would be developing once we determine who our partners are. But the board is very interested in us coming up with an arrangement where the library is the majority owner of the project.
A land lease could be used such that the other interest on the land don't own it. They only lease it for 100 years. That's a common model
Yes.
many people use around the country.
That's what the Ann Arbor Housing Commission does a lot.
Yes.
So is the board looking to co-own, or are they looking to land lease?
We're looking to own the library and lease the air rights above the library to partners and use that revenue to pay for the new library.
So that's the land lease.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I do recall that there was more than a little bit of opposition to the library board wanting to do very much what you're talking about now, back when the, excuse me, when it came up for a vote.
I'm sorry, that's false.
Okay,
the
I just-
project at that time
Well,
was solely a new library
I-
with no partner developments.
Yeah, right, except for the partner development, but
There was no
the
partner
vision,
development.
I understand that. Your vision that you've expressed today is very similar for the
Ah,
library.
okay, I see.
So it wasn't false in any way. And actually, I think that's kind of a loaded term. If you thought I was mistaken, I think that would have
My
been a much more civil way to express it. Anyway, Ann Arbor is, for millages, we pass almost everything here. So I don't think it's a question of it was, other ballot issues. I really disagree with you on that. I remember it. I remember the position of the library, and I remember there was a lot of community opposition. You said that back when the library was built, we had far fewer people in Ann Arbor. And that is true. We also didn't have all of these beautiful branches. So I think that focusing on just the downtown library, while ignoring the possibilities and the potential of the other branches, is a little bit misleading, because we do have opportunities, we do have space, and we do have lots of people using the other branch libraries. I'm not set against your proposal, but I think that much of what you've said is available in other parts of our community. I really appreciated all the comments, and particularly the comments about the university. It's true that we're not the university, but we also have access to a lot of things that the university offers. So it's not really, town versus gown. I don't understand why the issues and the questions that people have raised, it's clearly you've thought about them. You'll have to excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. Clearly you've thought about them. So I don't understand why you haven't thought them through sufficiently to be able to answer these questions before the property gets rezoned. And in particular, getting it rezoned to allow you to do this with a partner without having a really clear idea of what the ownership interest in a partner might be. Maybe there's a falling out, there's a conflict, and you still own it, but you do not control it.
Sure, and those are
Thank you.
aspects that need to be negotiated. And in many cases, those conversations can't even begin until the property is zoned to allow private ownership.
Well, you must have had some sort of legal opinion on the property interest.
I mean, just as far as like, is the library allowed to do this? And yes, the library is allowed to do this. But, our objective is to retain control of the property and to structure the deal with multiple partners in such a way that even if one entity acquired all the other partners over time, that the library would still be in control of the process. So we've given it a lot of thought.
I have heard people talk about the widespread lack of support in the community for this in the past, that this now seems like an end run around the wishes of the community.
Well, I'll tell you that we hear constantly from members of the community who are asking us to do this. We also hear constantly from people for whom the downtown library is their home branch, asking when they're going to get a nice space the way that all the branches have. The branches were built in 2002, 2004, 2006, and 2016. So they all have nice, shiny new branches. And it's something where our downtown residents are asking us if they can have a similar sort of facility as well. I think there's some questions over here.
Hi, my name is Meredith Kahn. I'm a resident of the 5th Ward, the fighting 5th, the largest of the wards. I'm a patron here at the Downtown Library. This is my home branch. I also happen to be a librarian. I don't work for this library. I work for a different library here in town. I have to say, I feel that a very compelling case has been presented. I think this would be a wonderful addition to our downtown. I fully support this, and I look forward to talking about this with other members of the community to develop support for whatever plan emerges. I'm excited by the potential of a taller building in the D1 zoned area of downtown, exactly where this kind of development is meant to be, the kinds of services that we could offer in a new space that is built for the 21st century. You've given some really great examples of what people are doing in other cities around the world, and I wish we could do something like that in Ann Arbor, and I think one way we can achieve that is by rezoning this property. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Megan Moonsoff. Like my dear colleague Meredith, I'm also a librarian at the University of Michigan, and I just want to +1 everything that Meredith said. I think this is an amazing opportunity for our community and for library and the people that use the library. I guess my question for you, Eli, is as a supporter of this rezoning request, what can we do to help you?
I think it's stay tuned. When the submission goes to Planning Commission, there'll be a public meeting for the Planning Commission. It'll go to City Council. Those are opportunities to show support or opposition, as the case may be, and then engage with the process. The library developed all of our facilities in public. All of those meetings, everything was done in public, and that's something that we intend to continue. And to engage with the process, let us know what you think. Talk to your friends and neighbors, and help people understand, because it's easy for alternate ways of understanding what's happening to come into place. And it's very helpful when there's people standing up for the library's motives and the library's dedication. I mean, this is a public organization. We are answering to the public. We have an elected board. They are elected by the public, and this is a public project. Thank you. Who's got the microphone? Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Griswold, and I just want to say I was one of the people that was opposed to the 2012 bond because it would raise taxes. And I think the library board has been an excellent steward of our funding. They have built new libraries without raising our taxes. And this proposal, if they collaborate with other community members and private entities, will give us a fabulous new library and housing without raising our taxes again. And so I think that's critical. And in fact, it would not go out to a vote of the people, right?
That's correct. Not under this model.
Yes, so another positive. Okay.
I mean, the people vote when they elect the library board.
Yes,
That's the governance that's happening.
No expensive campaign.
That's right.
I just want to briefly say that I think I'm among, I don't know how many people in the community, but probably 3 people here who would like to see a bigger vision. Something more, I mean, you don't have a partner with the DDA and the city, and I'd like to see a port area. I want to see a presence, and it just almost sounds, and you know, if you want, I like the auditorium, I want a bigger vision, and I think you should really put your vision out into the community.
You mean visually?
I think the zoning is probably less important than what your vision is going to be. And it's almost like a vision for a branch. I want a vision for a center.
Okay.
I think our city needs a center. It needs people, more public civic space, and I can't think of anything more important than a library to bring it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other comments? Got about 5 minutes left. Anyone else? All right then, thank you all so much for your time and engagement. You can always reach me, I'm just eli@aedl.org. You can also use our contact us on the library's website if you have any other comments or if you hear anything else. And stay tuned, we'll keep you posted. Thanks very much for your time, everyone.